Hello, and welcome back to the Bottom Culture Club. If you are returning, welcome back. If you are new here, welcome. I'm going to take a little bit of time in today's video just to recap the last videos that were shared, especially since the last time we've seen each other or spoke has been since the winter. The last video I posted was in November, and we discussed in a two-part video Toni Morrison's Sula, a really good and thorough discussion of the text. So if you have not checked out the previous videos, especially that first introductory video, please, take the time to do so. The video sets up and establishes the channel, the overall vision for the channel, its overall goal. But again, this is the Bottom Culture Club. I am your host, Aletha. It's been a while in me coming back, to the channel, because I'm going to be honest with you. In preparing to discuss Gayl Jones' text, A Song for Anninho, which is what we're here today to discuss. If you've read Gayl Jones before, you will know that Gayl Jones is not an easy read. And I don't mean to say that in order to turn anyone off. Really what I'm trying to do is quite the opposite. Gayl Jones is for the brave and for the courageous, okay? At the time that I was preparing the video for the Song for Anninho book review, it was kind of, I believe, a couple of days off of Gayl Jones' birthday. So I was really excited about, coming to the channel, introducing anyone who has not yet heard of Gayl Jones or anyone who's unfamiliar with her work. I was really excited to come in and introduce Gayl Jones. She is a protege of Toni Morrison, even though she's much, much more than that. She was born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky. She is a member of the contemporary arts movement, the contemporary writers. She wasn't a member of the Black Women's Renaissance, but she was mentored by that group. In previous videos, we've talked about, Queen Mother Toni Morrison and how not only was she a contributing writer of that particular movement, but she was also a culture bearer, right? So it was the writers of the contemporary movement, the men and women who also helped to establish, literary scholarship. So any of you who have taken African-American studies courses, anyone who has taken African-American literature courses, a lot of those courses were spearheaded by writers and activists like Toni Morrison, Angela Davis, Sonia Sanchez, Gloria Naylor, so many of the writers. And now they are called writers of the classics. When you are discussing and studying what's called the classics, I must be getting old. But when we discuss Toni Morrison, when we discuss those very strong, purposeful writers of the contemporary movement, and that's that period from around 1970s to late 1970s to late 1990s to early 2000s. I'm really covering that time frame, okay? A lot of change happened. A lot of the major contributors of that movement were students during the Black Power and the Civil Rights Movement. So a lot of the writers will overlap that you'll see. But when we are discussing Gayl Jones, and Gayl Jones is a contemporary writer that doesn't get the credit that she deserves. And the reason why she normally doesn't get the credit that she deserves is because she will tackle topics that could be considered taboo. It is not surprising to find discussions of SA, sexual assault, rape. Look, and I'm saying that so I don't get flagged on the YouTube video. Just the overall impact of racism, oppression, not just on the community, but on the Black woman specifically, okay? So Gayl Jones is not for the faint-hearted. And what I really do admire about her, what keeps me coming back to her books, is her ability to look the truth in the face and stare it down. You know, she is unflinching in her take, as it pertains to relationships, as it pertains to love, as it pertains to the woman's role in society, you know, the woman's place in the family. And it really is in line with a lot of what the contemporary writers of that period, you know, and what they were striving to do. Again, I want you guys to make sure you go back to those earlier videos, especially the first one, because in laying out the introduction for the channel, the Bottom Culture Club, which is named after the small town in Toni Morrison, Sula, and which is also named after every cultural hotspot, every black neighborhood, every place where the magic happens, right? That is the bottom. It normally is where pain exists, but also joy. It is where, you know, you'll have tears, but you also have laughter. So the bottom itself is similar in housing Gayl Jones' identity, in housing her overall approach to African American culture, right? It is bred out of those tough times. It is illuminated out of, you know, struggle, you know, forged by fire, right? So the bottom, whether it's the neighborhood, whether it was the fictional community in Toni Morrison, Sula, whether it is this channel, this platform where we come together to discuss literature, film, and African American culture. It all speaks of the magical contributions of, you know, African American, them pretty much pouring out their heart and soul, right, for the collective. So with this particular text, with every book that Gayl Jones has penned, I feel like she is pouring out her heart and soul for the collective. What's interesting enough about Gayl Jones is she is highly published. She is recognized. But for some reason, I'm not sure why, she's not thoroughly taught. And I think it could be because of the subject matter a lot of times that she tackles. She has those discussions that a lot of people, again, will call taboo, that a lot of people would try to steer away from. And that is exactly the reason why I'm running to her, okay? I mentioned earlier how the video was delayed from November because of many things, but primarily because, I mean, that thing tore me open. I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you. The text itself just tore me open, especially with where I was in my particular, you know, journey at the time, okay? So before we dive into this, I want to frame it, okay? I want to take just a minute to frame the text, to give a little bit of context. So, and I've also been spending a lot of time trying to get the glare off my glasses. So if you notice the glare, try to ignore it. But I have the ring light. I have my laptop. You know, I'm fighting a losing battle here. Okay. But Gayl Jones, I'm glad you guys are back with me today to discuss Gayl Jones, a national treasure. Interestingly enough, even though I did major in English in undergrad, majored in English literature in graduate school, I was never introduced to Gayl Jones in any of my literature courses. Even my, you know, African American lit course, you know, my feminism courses, you know, anything where the voice of the woman was amplified, you know, any of those classes, I am amazed. I feel cheated. I feel a ways in that I was formally introduced to Gayl Jones by a colleague. So working at Malcolm X College in Chicago, Illinois, I had a colleague who asked me, had I ever incorporated Gayl Jones into my syllabus? And I'm like, Gayl Jones, who? And just let me tell you guys the shame in saying who is Gayl Jones when you are a English major. You know, it just did something to me. But nevertheless, I'm forever grateful to my colleague who let me borrow a book of his, all about Gayl Jones. And that first opening text that introduced me to Gayl Jones is Eva's Man, okay? And we're going to talk about Eva's Man. What I'm rolling out today, in addition to the discussion of Gayl Jones' poetry form novel, A Song for Anninho, I'm going to also lay out the summer series. So the text that I've read in our absence and the text that I plan to discuss over the next few weeks as we start, the summer season. Okay, but in helping to outline today's discussion of Gayl Jones, there are a few things that I connected with as I was reading the text, okay? And if you are a voracious reader of literature, if you are either a student, a teacher, or just, again, a lover of literature, there are certain things that take place when we read, okay? Reading is not a passive activity. It's important that you are open to, the connections that are made as you encounter a text, as you navigate through a text. So as I was reading the text, and it's a short, again, novel written in, poetic meter. Actually, I believe this was the first book of its time, and this was published in 1981. But I believe it was the first book of its time to be published, a novel, a poem form used as a novel, okay? So very creative, which I wouldn't expect anything less from Gayl Jones. She is revolutionary in her style, okay? So I mentioned earlier how she was a mentee of Toni Morrison, a student almost, in that Toni Morrison's ideas for African-American literature, you can see prominently demonstrated in Gayl Jones' work. Gayl Jones is committed to the mission of the contemporary period. Again, the writers at that time, they were not individuals kind of out writing and doing their own thing. They were individual writers, but they operated as a collective in that they understood that the writing was bigger than them. They were not just seeking to tell stories. They were seeking to tell stories and to also, make political and social change. It was very intentional. So with Toni Morrison, not as the only writer of this time, she was one of the most popular, her, Alice Walker, Nikki Giovanni. Some of them are some of the most popular contemporary writers, but all of the writers at this time, sung and unsung, they were on their job. They were contributing to the overall mission, okay? And Gayl Jones is a great example of this. Her writing a lot of times was edited and published by Toni Morrison. So I find her work doubly blessed, in that she herself is gifted. She's a gifted storyteller, interpreter. She has a gift. She's a griot. But also the fact that she was open to and accepting of the advice, the light of Toni Morrison, just makes her even larger in my sight, okay? So really quickly, even though if anybody knows me, if you've ever taken a class with me, nothing is really quickly. But I am going to do my best to not drag this video out. So, Miss Gayl Jones, last we spoke was in November, and I was kind of excited to return to you because her birthday was late November. I think it was like the weekend of Thanksgiving. So I always, think of her. There's times where I am constantly swapping out what I call my ascended masters. I'm constantly swapping out my literary heroes on my altar. So it'll alternate between Toni Morrison stays there. June Jordan, Gloria Naylor, so many I'm forgetting. Not necessarily, Alice Walker is still with us, but she's still, beloved. But Toni Morrison, I'm forgetting. I'm saying Gloria Naylor. There's so many. But Ishmael Reed. Oh, we're going to talk about Ishmael Reed. But all of them had a particular talent, shall I say, okay? And what I love about Gayl Jones is her talent to tell the truth, okay? She comes from a household of women. She was raised in a home with her grandmother and mother. She was raised at the table, of women. And as her grandmother would cook, as her mother would cook, they would tell stories. So a lot of the storytelling tradition that Gayl Jones invokes is the oral storytelling tradition. Even though she writes it, it's still a very conversational tone that she writes in. It is still a attempt to not sugarcoat or hold any secrets. It's almost as though we are being invited into the kitchen that she would normally sit at and hear the stories of her grandmother and mother. We are now in Gayl Jones's kitchen, and she's given us some very beautiful, very illuminating stories, okay? A lot of her stories you will find peppered in mention of mother and grandmother. She's very intentional with the passing down of traditions, the passing down of one's history, the protection of ritual and tradition. Again, she in every way embodies the griot, which is the scribe of the community. They are the one who reports, what's going on with the group. And when it comes to Gayl Jones, normally people want to hear, feel good stories. We always want to hear what makes us feel good, and they lived happily ever after. But if you know anything about, African American life, if you know anything about, just the resilience and perseverance that it takes, to live not only in this time, but definitely, in the time of our ancestors. To quote Langston Hughes, life for us ain't been no crystal stair, okay? And what I really love about Gayl Jones is just her ability to, tell the story. Tell the story. I don't even feel like when I read her stories that there is a filter in which I'm reading it through. It feels as though, again, this truth teller energy, it feels as though either my grandmother or my mother is sitting me down and telling me the real. Okay. So when we talk about Gayl Jones, when we think about Gayl Jones, that's how I want us to think about her. Okay. This is someone you can trust. Although the information may sometimes make you feel uncomfortable, because it definitely made me feel uncomfortable. And we're going to talk about that. But consider the source. Okay. Consider the source as a loving source. Consider the source as an empowering source, right? And also consider the source as one amplifying memory and time, okay? What I really love about not just the channel, the Bottom Culture Club, but what I love about literature in general is its ability to capture a time, okay? It is wisdom set aside for us that we can always look back to, okay? There's an idea mentioned in this text about there's nothing new under the sun, okay? Everything that has been done before. A lot of times we just have to remember it. So it's this idea of memory, okay? And Gayl Jones and Toni Morrison, she wrote an essay, I believe it's called Memory, but she wrote an essay where she talked about the writer's job is to kind of channel, memory, to recall either those jewels from our grandparents, those jewels from our ancestors, but it is the recalling of it that helps us to heal it. Okay, so she feels Toni Morrison, Gayl Jones, most of the writers during that contemporary period, which is now called the classics, a lot of those writers, they wrote to heal. Okay, so I'll dive in and out to help me stay on track because we're about 20 minutes in and I'm still in my introduction. But I think a little while ago I said that Gayl Jones was from Louisville, Kentucky. I had a brain fart. She's from Lexington, Kentucky. Okay, so she is from Kentucky. It says she published her debut novel, Corregidora, at age 25. We are going to talk about Corregidora. Okay, so I'll introduce you guys formally to all those books before we get out of here. But Gayl Jones is recognized as a key figure in 20th century African-American literature. So that's that contemporary period, okay? So although you may not have heard of her, or if you haven't heard of her, I want you guys to kind of take time now and let's kind of dive into the mind of Gayl Jones as it relates to love, okay, in this text, Song for Anninho, all right? The women writers of the contemporary period of the 20th century African-American literature, their weapon of choice was their words, of course, yes, but also they felt that the way that the revolution would happen, the way that the revolution would take place would be in ordinary, everyday lives. It's the doing what we do every day and persevering that is the rebellion. Okay, so I want you guys to again keep in mind that this group, even though Gayl Jones would have been really, really young at the civil rights movement or the Black Power movement, it's not to say she wasn't influenced by it. Okay, she actually lists her influences as Alice Walker, but also James Joyce and Ernest Hemingway. So although Gayl Jones grew up, in the kitchen, listening to the stories of her grandmother and mother, she was also classically trained, in literature as well. Okay. So with the text, I went ahead and made an outline to kind of help me stay on track because reading this just takes me all over the place. Okay. So in setting up context and getting us started, as I was reading the text, and anytime you read anything, there's always, again, this process of connection that's taking place, okay? So as you're reading, you are processing how you connect to the text, how you connect to the information that you're taking in. So there may be a text to self connection where you are, as an individual, connecting to the text, experience to experience. There's also a method of connecting to the text called text to text. So sometimes when we are reading literature, the plot, the themes, some of the ideas discussed, they may connect us back to another text, okay? And I see a lot of this happening as I read the writers from that contemporary movement, whether it is male writers or women writers, the Black women's Renaissance writers. They have similarities in ways that not only reflect the time, but, also reflect sentiment, how society feels at that particular time. The way you normally check the pulse of a society is you will check the music of that particular time. You can check the politics of that time or, the journalism, but also the literature. That's normally how you can gauge, what was happening, what was the feeling of that particular time. And like I mentioned earlier, Gayl Jones brings up the idea in this text that there's nothing new under the sun. Our foremothers and forefathers have already written a blueprint from us, written the blueprint for us. Right now in 2024, some of us are kind of, loss. Look, and forgive my nail, you guys. I just caught my clips of my nail. Don't worry about it, okay? We're focused. But with the current climate of society now in 2024, especially when I think about love, you know, I think that the jewels that a lot of our foremothers and forefathers taught us, I think we do need to be looking back at what was written. I think we do need to look back at the secrets and the mysteries that are, you know, again, forefathers and foremothers laid out for us. If we are facing similar issues, sometimes the going back, you know, looking back, Sankofa moment, right? Sometimes the looking back or going back is the only way to heal it, okay? I've noticed also too with this, you know, where we are in time, you know, with the current generation, there seems to be a disregard of history or a inconsideration of history as it relates to the present. Like a lot of people fail to see the connection between the two, how a lot of things that were forecasted, a lot of things that were, I'm gonna say prophesied only because I don't know any other word for it. It's, you know, the authors at the time who are using their voice, their throat chakra to, you know, illuminate the collective. You know, they're telling us things that we'll need on this path, on this journey. So that's the beautiful thing for me about literature is I do treat it like a guide. I do go back to see what the, you know, the saints have to say. You know, they are trusted voices for me, scholars, you know, just like I am. They are intellectually invested in the community and the culture. So the classics is where I go, okay? And when I think about love, the contemporary writers used love as a tool for revolution. There are many discussions of relationships as the theme of a story to help us understand freedom, to help us understand spiritual awakening, a lot of things, okay? But in telling those stories, and this reminds me specifically of James Baldwin, his use of the essay, his use of personalization, kind of, you know, putting himself and his experience in the center. All of that is, I mean, it's the Lord's work, honestly. I mean, it's something that maybe we didn't know, but it is desperately needed now. So for the next few weeks, I am focusing, you guys know this channel totally focuses on the classics. It focuses on the contemporary literary movement. But this issue of love is unique because the reason I found it so hard to get through this book at the time that I was reading it in November, and the reason that I found it really hard to talk about my response or my reaction to the book is because, you know, I was down on love. I was really not in a good place when it came to love. I was, you know what I'm going to say, in a lower vibration. You know, you might have caught an F love out of me at that time, but that's what's always so beautiful about the classics. So beautiful about the classics is it that it always kind of brings you back home, okay? So in reading this particular text from Gayl Jones, I connected with it in two ways early on, okay? So I want you guys, if you can, remember the song by Otis Redding called Try a Little Tenderness, okay? I wanted to play it, but I know that there's copyright issues a lot of times with YouTube, so I don't want to risk it. But I will really quickly just kind of read the opening lyric because, again, in making a connection with the text, I channeled this song. This song came to me as I was reading the text. So what I thought of as I was being introduced to the story of Anninho and And I'm sorry, you guys. I don't really want to mess these names up. But Almeida, I'll say Almeida. Anninho and Almeida. Anninho is her man. That's her lover. And Almeida is the narrator. She is the, young woman in the story, the young lover in the story. So we'll talk about that. But yeah, this song by Otis Redding, I had an immediate connection, okay? So it opens up, oh, she may be weary, and young girls, they do get wearied, wearing that same old shaggy dress. But when she gets weary, try a little tenderness, okay? That word tenderness was repetitive in the text, okay? And little did I know at the time, where I am doing my best to resist this text, as I'm doing my best to resist the subject matter. What was needed for me as well was a little bit of tenderness with myself, but also tenderness when it comes to, the topic of love. When you think about African American culture, when you think about, in discussion of the bottom, the joys and the pains, right? The highs and the lows. What has normally gotten us over has been the love that we have for one another, the love we have for each other, right? That love of community, that love of family, that love of all things Black. And I'll be honest, it's a love. It's a love. It is a loving yourself when no one else will. It is a soulful love. It is a love that comes from the depths of a oppressed and, battered group. Now, we are resilient. We persevere without doubt. But what normally pulls us, over those hurdles is love, the hope of love, right? And although there's not a lot of use of the word love, it's the answer, okay? So again, with this Otis Redding song, what's so important, what Gayl Jones makes a call for in the text is for tenderness, okay? Tenderness is the resolution, or it will help with the issue, okay, that, we're currently facing, all right? And I'll kind of dive into it as I'm getting into the sections of the text. Now, this again is a very short text. I believe it was like 80 pages, and it is written in poetry format, right? That, stanza format, okay? And in the text, Gayl Jones breaks down the story of Almeida and Anninho in 3 parts, okay? So it begins with a displacement, war-torn Brazil. It moves into escape, and efforts from the colonizers to recapture. So what happens to the love when, danger and death are a part of the equation, right? And the last part of the novel moves into resolution, right? What does the future hold? What are future possibilities as it relates to, this love for one another, okay? So the connection of Otis Redding, Try a Little Tenderness, I connected with the text that way. And I also connected with the text through a poem by Francis E.W. Harper called Songs for the People. This was a departure from the text that Gayl Jones normally wrote, okay? So she is doing something new here in terms of style, but she had always been a poetry writer, a lover of poetry, okay? But the poetry novel is something that, she, I want to say revolutionized, because, that's, she's a revolutionary. So she's very brave, she's very courageous in not only telling the story, but utilizing the form that she did. But in telling the story, naming it Song for Anninho. That reminded me of Frances Ellen Watkins Harper's poem, Songs for My People. And I'm not quite sure when this was written, but me knowing that Gayl Jones came from the contemporary movement and Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, I believe she came from the realism, naturalism movement. So a little bit before, a couple of movements before Gayl Jones and her class, right? But look at how she sets up the writers that are up and coming, okay? So let's say a young Gayl Jones, as a voracious reader and scholar that she was, let's say she's in the library and she reads a poem by Frances, Ellen Watkins Harper, and she's inspired by this particular poem. I felt like her book was a response to this poem, okay? That was my connection to it. So I'm going to hop into the text. Let me really quickly read this poem. Well, I won't really quickly read it. I'll just kind of throw out certain parts of it. So it begins with, let me make the songs for the people, songs for the old and young, songs to stir like a battle cry whenever they are sung. Okay? So I just call Gayl Jones a revolutionary. I call Gayl Jones a, she is a major contributor of contemporary writing of the classics that helped to shape a lot of the reading, that we see today. But where Frances Ellen Watkins Harper says, songs to stir like a battle cry, it's important to understand that literature, words, the power of words, it's the sword. It is the sword. Truth is the sword. Like, battles have been won with the tongue, right? With, those certain ideas. So what Frances E.W. Harper is saying is, pick up your weapon, like whatever that weapon may be, in the case of Gayl Jones and in the case of, the poet herself, her weapon is her songs. It's her writing. It's the stories. And it says, let me make songs for the people, songs for the old and young, songs to stir like a battle cry whenever they are sung, wherever they are sung. So she's kind of setting it up. She knows how important these stories are. Their job is to stir the hearts of the readers. It doesn't matter when, because it says old and young. So it doesn't matter the reader in terms of when they were born. It doesn't matter the generation. And it doesn't matter where the particular text is found. It says songs to stir like a battle cry wherever they are sung. Wherever they are sung. They are supposed to record and tell the stories of, reality in that place, reality in that moment, okay? And a lot of the language that Frances E.W. Harper uses in this poem that I connected with the text is the language of war. She says, not for the clashing of sabers, for carnage, nor for strife, but songs to thrill the hearts of men with more abundant life. So she's saying, yeah, I'm wielding my own sword. I'm not out here taking lives. I'm not trying to, leave carnage. I'm trying to stir hearts. I'm trying to stir the hearts. I'm trying to get men to think and to feel, right? So there is an awareness, again, like I talked about the intention and purposefulness of telling these stories, okay? So we want to look at that, all right? I'll post a link to the Otis Redding song and the Frances E.W. Harper poem, just so you guys can kind of make your own connections. But where she says, hold on, let me make the songs for the weary amid life's fever and fret, till hearts shall relax their tension and careworn brows forget. There's that word weary, right? Young girls, they do get weary. Try a little tenderness, right? I think that whether the tenderness is love or whether the tenderness is the truth, the sword from the song or the stories. It is the job of the writer to tell the story, okay? And what Gayl Jones does in Song for Anninho is she tells the story of the characters Almeida and Anninho, but honestly, they could have been anybody, okay? This particular story is written well, not written. The story is about the Brazilian Colombo called Palmeiras, okay? And Palmeiras was one of the last Brazilian communities. And when I say Brazilian, what I mean by that is escaped slaves in the mountains of Brazil. After they escaped, revolted, and, found refuge in the mountains, the rainforests of Brazil, they kind of created their own communities here, right? And at that time, and I believe this was the 17th century, at that time, there were 7 operating Colombos. And that is, these communities, again, that were governed and found and created by, slaves after they, again, either ran away or, revolted. They are attempting to escape recapture, okay? And because these communities resided in the rainforests of Brazil, they resided in, the mountains, they had an advantage over the enemy, right? They had an advantage. They were familiar with the landscape of the rainforest. They were familiar with every plant, every tree. They knew what was poisonous and what were not. They knew where to lure their captors, in order to trap them, okay? So it wasn't a case of, they ran away and were immediately recaptured. No, this is the Dutch, I believe. Yeah, the Portuguese. I'm sorry. This is the Portuguese who are, seeking to break the strongholds of the Negroes of Palmeiras. And this is kind of what I'm reading directly from the text, okay? So it says, the survivors of Palmeiras scattered, okay? So this book opens up with that last community from Palmeiras, from the Colombo. So these again are these escaped slaves, those who have revolted and found refuge in the rainforests of Brazil, okay? They have fought the good fight. They have evaded capture. They have grown. They have thrived. But just like anything, the time has come for war. The time has come for war. So at this particular time, Palmeiras is attacked. Palmeiras is defeated. And this is where the story opens up. We find the members of the community, 2 members of the community, the Palmeiras community. These are escaped slaves who made their own freedom. They made their own community. They made their own homes, their own rules, their own communities, right? And they thrived. But with the attack on Palmeiras, Almeida and Anninho, they were displaced. So the story begins with displacement. That's where we open up, okay? So this is a war-torn experience that we're reading about. You can pick up early on just the confusion that Almeida is in, just the grief that the home and the joy and the memories that they had built in Palmeiras, it will never be again, okay? So it's love during war, okay? Love during despair. Love against all odds, all right? So that's the setup for the story of Almeida and Anninho, okay? They are scattered. They are running for their life because not only has Palmeiras been defeated, but the troops are pursuing, the inhabitants. They want to make sure that they do not escape again because they fear that they will just create another community. And they want to also, kind of set an example. If any other group thought about, defecting or revolting in a similar way, they were attempting to make an example of this group. Okay, so Almeida and Anninho, they are uniquely aware that their lives are in danger. Okay, that their home is gone. All right, so this is the mindset that they are working with. So the beginning of the book, that first part, opens up with Almeida and Anninho separated. They've been separated. Okay, so during the chaos of the war, during the the carnage, the ransacking of the beautiful community Palmares, Almeida and her love Anninho, they're separated. Okay, so Almeida stumbles upon a elder. Okay, Zabatra is I call her a high priestess. She is a prophetess, a medicine woman, a healer, however she was referred to at the time. She's an elder. Okay, and she's someone who Almeida finds refuge with. Okay, so this is the young and the old. Okay, and again, it's a time of grief. It's a time of displacement. And what the elder Zabatra does is she helps nurse Almeida back to health. Not only does she help Almeida with, just love and nurture. She's giving her kind words. She's nurturing her. She's teaching her. She is asking her to remember and record all that she sees, right? But it is this compassion. It's this kindness and community, because they are from Palmares. It is this kindness that Zabatra is extending to Almeida that is kind of establishing the community. Even though the group or the Quilombo is destroyed, the love, the connection between those two members of the community is what is keeping them going. Okay, so yeah, it begins with her healing Almeida. So she's rubbing her body with oil. She's tending to the scars because Almeida she's walked away with a lot of scars. She barely escaped with her life. Okay, and in addition to being lost, displaced, and hurt, she is looking for her lover. She's looking for Anninho. Okay, and it says here, the trees are tall here. The men are tall. The men are the color of the black bark, but men are not trees. Sap is not blood. Bark is not the flesh of men. I do not believe the trees can hear me singing. I touch them. Some vibrations of voice, perhaps my tenderness. Okay, there's that word. So kind of coming to the realization of where, she's looking around, kind of taking inventory of where she is, and she's saying, where's the men? All I see is trees. Where are our men? Okay. And she says, I do not believe the trees can hear me singing. But what she really is talking about is a loss of connection. She feels that loss of connection. Now, she doesn't know it yet because she's younger, but the elder will teach her that the trees, you can connect with, love and with, that energy in connecting with nature, in connecting with trees. But immediately, Zabatra tells her, this is a good place. This is a good place. The tree amongst the trees are safe. It says, because it is like the place we lived before, like our own country. Okay. So again, we begin with Zabatra and Almeida. They are establishing a relationship of mother and daughter. Although they are not, it still is this relationship of nurturing nature. Okay. She's nurturing her. Almeida is not alone. She has someone who she can confide in. So what she notices with the environment that she's in, with the trees and that no one is there, she keeps calling for Anninho. She says, because he was kind to me. Anninho was kind to me. Okay, so we open up with kindness, tenderness and kindness. She's looking for it. She's missing it. After her community was displaced due to war, she was separated from her man. And one thing that she remembers when she thinks of her man is she remembers he was kind to me and he was tender. That's that memory. It's the memory, okay? So Almeida knows who her man is. She know who he is. She just can't see him. She just can't find him. But she has these memories, with which to identify him. So, again, it's this constant question of where is he? Where is he? But he was so kind to me. And Zabatra kind of takes, she finds that statement curious in that she's like, why wouldn't he be kind to you? Like, she's almost asking, like, why is it noteworthy? Or why do you keep repeating, he was kind to me? He was kind to me. She's saying that, here's what she said. Why wouldn't he be? Why wouldn't he be kind? She says, and this is what Almeida says. She says, I don't know, but he was so kind to me, my friend. And you must tell me if you can truly see into time and transformations of place. She's looking for him. And Zabatra said, why wouldn't he be kind? Didn't you give him, what he wanted? And Almeida says, yeah, I gave him more than that. And, she was like, it was like he took a hold of me and shaped me. And I highlighted this because that's normally what love feels like. It is a possession that shapes. When I think of, the man and the woman, especially if we want to use the terms, let's say divine feminine, divine masculine, just people operating as they should, then I think of, the man as the sun, the woman as moon, but him being the light and her being the mirror. She reflects it, right? So it's hard for her to see herself without him, okay? So she's struggling with that part. And Zabatra, the medicine woman, is here to help her with that, right? That kind of finding your place, in separation, okay? So home is gone, but Almeida knows she must endure, okay? And enduring means carrying the scars, carrying this burden of not only missing home. And if any of you, love home the way I love home, to have a place that once comforted you, that once you called your own, and then for it to be taken away, never to be seen again, it's trauma. That is trauma. And this, again, of course, is a trauma of war, and we could talk about any situation right now. We can bring up, the Congo. We can bring up Palestine. We can bring up, I believe, Kenya. We can bring up a lot of places right now and talk about this scenario of displacement, of, people losing their homes, looking for loved ones, feeling, just that trauma. and that I almost don't know anything worse. So I'm struggling to find the word for it. But Gayl Jones does a really good job of setting us up with it at the beginning. Lots of imagery, lots of, again, that poetic language, that searing language. You know, Gayl Jones leaves an impression on your mind. It's like the way she uses metaphor, the way she uses language, just in general. It helps to illuminate, you know, the story, but it also gives you a new way of approaching it. She gives me a new way of approaching it, okay? So, displacement. Just like I talked about the bottom, this place of joy and pain, highs and lows. Displacement is full of pain, but as is what we do in Black culture, Almeida and Zabatra, they are pulling the magic out of this moment. That is what they are attempting to do, okay? The magic and the healing. So Zabatra is set up in the opening of the story as a guide. Again, a high priestess, a prophetess for Almeida. She's given her wisdom for this leg of the journey. This is part 1. And this leg of the journey is all about displacement. She is lost. She's looking for her love. And she's coming to terms with quite a few things in the process, okay? So she is aware all things are transforming. And while the transformation is painful, she's also, I don't want to say she's looking for promise in the pain, okay? She's looking for promise in the pain. So it's transformation. We talk about her not seeing any water, you know, only dead frogs, and how dead frogs symbolize this transition, you know, birth, rebirth, you know, renewal of spirit. The displacement was a transformation for her, but it was also a renewal of spirit. It is going to be a rebirth for her, okay? She will not emerge from this experience the same, okay? It says she's transforming from soul to commodity, unfortunately. The attack on Palmeiras, which was the last of the 7 Quilombos from, you know, the Brazilian revolts. It was kind of that last dance with freedom, okay? Because it became the goal of the Portuguese and, you know, colonial society. It became the goal to capture and enslave, you know, the descendants of Africans, okay? It was a goal. So at this time, life for Almeida and Anninho and Zabatra will never be the same, okay? So she's making sense of this transformation, all right? So she says, when she got past the destruction, the devastation, she took in a breath. She said, and it was becoming earth, okay? So she keeps calling Anninho. She calls out for him, okay? And the text is taking us between her waking state and her dream state. So we're traveling. We are traveling and moving in between waking moments and moments of astral projection, moments of dreaming, and I want to say moments of in and out of consciousness, because we want to keep in mind that Almeida has been attacked. You know, she is hurt. And Zabatra is nursing her back to health, okay? So while she is healing, she's calling for her man. And she hears him answer her back, okay? But with the answer back, she says, Anninho. And instead of answering back Almeida, he says, woman. Transformation, right? There was a time in history where the black man and the black woman, they had love and tenderness between them, okay? There was a time when they lived freely and loved freely, they did not identify each other as other. They did not identify each other pertaining to genders. They did not identify each other as strangers or baby mamas and baby fathers, single parents and single fathers. Now, I'm making my connections because I tell you guys, when I read, I make my own connections. A reason why getting through this book, I struggled so hard getting through this book, is the state of love right now has had me in a chokehold. I, at some points, am so disappointed in the state of Black love at some time. So I don't need everybody getting in my comments, saying, Black love is beautiful and it's thriving. There are places where it is just like this war-torn country in Brazil, where women are calling for their loves and there is no answer being made, where women are calling out for their divine masculine, for their man. And I say man because, the Black man is our man. So they're calling out for their man, but he is not answering. He's not responding. And what has happened is the time and the space, it just keeps getting wider and deeper, okay? And there have been lots of casualties in the process. The beautiful thing about this story is Anninho and Almeida, they're fighting for it. They are attempting to fight for it, okay? But this particular book triggered me, this particular story triggered me like nobody's business, because where I am currently, like I told you guys, I am at the end of a marriage, personally. I am at a place in time where I feel displaced, okay? I'm at a place in time where I feel scattered and, war-torn. I'm at a place where I am contemplating, is love war? Why does it feel that way? So y'all, reading this at the time that I was reading it, I just couldn't. I mean, I couldn't get out of bed some days. And Gayl Jones, in the manner that she does, because it's almost like she brings a mirror and puts a mirror up to your face, right? And it was like every time I opened this text up, it was like I kept looking at, I kept confronting, my own story. So I struggled. Look, here we are. What is this? 6 months later, I've struggled in getting through this because I feel like the story of love and where we are today, it went from poetry to a tragedy almost, but we'll talk more about that. So yeah, the opening, what the beginning of this book did for me is it showed me that we didn't start in war. We were not always against each other. There used to be tenderness. There used to be love. There used to be a time for love, okay? But with war, with colonization, with slavery, with the transatlantic slave trade, it's almost like we all turned into Almeida and Anninho. It's like with that separation, it's like we've been trying to get each other back ever since. And it's like we've been calling, the name But, either that person, that time for love, it just eludes us. Or sometimes we may feel that way, similar to how Almeida feels here in the text, okay? So part 1 is all about that. It begins with them being separated and having to endure this separation. What each one is doing on their separate path as they try to find their way back to each other, okay? I'm already an hour in. I always try very hard not to go long, but it is what it is, okay? You guys are going to get all these minutes, okay? But really great beginning to the text, in that Gayl Jones does a great job of establishing the love. You can tell from the beginning that Almeida loves her man. The only reason why she's waking up every day and kind of going through the motions is because that's a day she has to look for her man. Okay? So I want you to understand how closely related this is to her purpose. Okay? So we find Almeida and we find Zabatra. She's being nursed back to health. And the priestess is allowing Almeida to recover her memory. So she's asking her questions. She is communicating with her in ways that pulls the memory out of her. It's important that as a woman, you don't forget you represent memory. If we go back in time, which I kind of don't always like to do this because I don't want to bring up any room for disagreement. I want to kind of like really stick with the text, but when I think about Almeida, I think about a warrior. Just like when I think about Anninho, I think about a warrior. She has a fight, a battle, that she has to confront. And what she knows is that in confronting this, she will make it back to her love. So she wakes up every day and fight. She wakes up every day and fight because of her man, like the love. She knows that the home is gone. The home is gone. That time and space is gone. We will never get it back. But what I do have, I have the love. I have that love that came from that place. Her and Anninho came from that place. What they carry together is on the inside of them. So they can go to other places if they remember. They can go to other places. Now, I won't say that they can recreate it because a lot of times it just may be impossible to do so. But with the memory, it's not lost. With the memory, the love can be recaptured. And what I took from this is right now where we are on this plane, in our particular life's journey, we forgot. We have forgotten the love. We have total amnesia. We look at each other like we are total strangers, like we didn't come from the same place. And I really, really have a problem with that. Like, I really, really have a problem with that. And that's the reason why I told you guys how this book, a lot of it triggered me because it's almost as though this is the Adam and Eve story that captured before it went left. Okay? But what we see here is we see it, what can I say? We see trouble on the horizon. We see trouble on the horizon. What came out of that war-torn displacement, what came out of her being separated from her lover is he failed to long for her. He failed to recognize her. He instead of remembering where he came from, he started adopting the ideas of where he was. Okay? So that memory was lost. And in losing the memory, the love was lost. Okay? So in that first part, we find Anninho turning his back on Almeida. Now, he doesn't turn his back on Almeida out of spite or because he doesn't have feelings for her. He turns his back on Almeida out of focus on the mission, okay? It was almost no time for love when you're trying to survive, right? So Anninho's head stayed on a swivel because he is escaping, right? He knows that the Portuguese troops are looking for him. So the attention, the love that he has for Almeida, he doesn't really have time to foster it. He's trying to survive, right? But Almeida, she is hanging on to the memory. She is doing her best to hang on to the love for him. But as we move into part 2, we see how time and space takes a toll, okay? Time and space begins to take a toll on the connection. And what started out as a separation, what started out as displacement, it quickly turns into loss of name, loss of culture, loss of identity, loss of voice, loss of desire, loss of memory. We see what happened to the love. It was loss. It was loss, okay? So I want to talk a little bit about that, spend a couple minutes talking about that, because part 2, after we became familiar with the love story of Anninho and Almeida, they were young lovers from the Colombo. They grew up together. He knew her and found her beautiful. He loved her, and he always considered himself hers, just like she considered him hers. Look, does that make sense? Right? So there was that recognition between the two, okay? That's that love, the recognition of who she is to him and who he is to her, okay? So the cycles, the time has changed, the time has shifted. They are now in a time of war. They are now in a time of colonialism, okay? And the effects of colonialism is stepping in to erase their story, to erase the love that was made, really to erase them. Because what happened as those ships were launched and bodies were packed into, that, hull of the ship, that was a transition, a transformation where the African transformed into property. They transformed into a new identity. Okay? And that identity, it has had us lost ever since, in all honesty. Okay? So efforts to recapture what was lost is what we find in the second part. And one thing that was lost for Almeida, and she is the woman, this is the woman narrator, as she was captured, Almeida's breasts were cut off. Okay, that's one of the first things that the colonizers did, in capturing or enslaving, the men and women of Africa is they strip them of their title. They strip them of who they are. So if it's a woman, you are neither woman nor man. You're property. If it's a man, you're neither man or anything. You're property. So the cutting off of the breast in this text, I looked at it as it's cutting her off from her source, cutting her off from her identity, cutting her off from who she is. Okay, let me make sure my mic is still on. So we see that happening. There's also in part 2 the establishment of a new voice. So in that first part, we have Zabatra's voice. And Zabatra's voice was helping to heal Almeida, helping to spark her memory, and helping to keep her healthy and on task for this next leg of her journey. Zabatra let her know it's not going to get any easier, but you must hold on to your memory. That's what one of the main things she kept telling her. You must hold on to your memory. Okay? He is going to need your memory. All right? So the second part, we see Zabatra is gone, and it is now Almeida and Anninho. They have found each other, but in the finding of each other, this is a new reality. Okay? So they have the same love, but they are attempting to use that same love in new circumstances. Okay? So it talks about the difficulties of that. Again, with his efforts to recapture, Almeida is desperate to recapture the love and the, that familial feeling with Anninho. She needs it. To her, he's home. You are how I get home. So, she's fixated on him. Her eyes is on him. His eye is on the problem, or what he sees as the problem. So he's taking his eye off her. Okay? And that's not to say that the woman should be the center of attention. And no, it's to say that she should be looked at as nation building. She's home. So you don't want to disregard or discount her contribution, especially if the goal is to be free or get back home, because she's home. Okay? So it's efforts to recapture home. You will see a lot of Almeida calling Anninho's name. You'll see her saying his name over and over and over again. She does not want him to forget who he is. But you'll see that when she calls his name by his direct name, Anninho, he will respond and say, woman. So we see the slip. We see this new language, okay? He's not identifying her as her anymore. He's identifying her as woman. Now that's odd, because when Almeida was, recaptured, recaptured. When she was recaptured, her breasts were cut off. The colonizers were doing everything they can to remind her, the humanity isn't in your femininity or you being a woman or anything. There's no humanity in you. And that's kind of what I take of the cutting of her breast off. What was the purpose of them cutting her breast off? Other than to, I'm cutting it. Well, we know the black woman, she's source. So to cut her breasts off, to emasculate, can I call it emasculate? No, because emasculate is when you take a man. What do I call it? No, trans. The word is trans. I'm struggling. I'm struggling with what to call it. Taking her essence. But It was intentional him taking those breasts off. That was intentional, right? He's letting her know, you ain't a woman. You ain't nothing to me. Personally, that's what I think. But that's why it was strange for me that Anninho in this new place, and then, them again picking up this new language, that he would identify her as woman. But we do know that woman was identified as other. So by him saying woman and not calling her by her name, he's already starting to identify her as other. This is the effect of war. This was the effect of displacement. Not only did they lose the physical home, but in losing their memory, by losing their tongue, their songs, their language, they are losing that connection. They're losing the connection. Okay. So Almeida talks about the importance of establishing a new voice, establishing a new song. I want to see. I made certain notes to read, but this time, you guys, I'm not even going to try to. Okay. So now they have a new song. They have a new mission. The mission first part was to survive and not forget. That was the mission. This second part, the mission is to do the best to remain together now that they found each other, to not lose sight of each other, not to lose, the love and the connection that they have with each other, okay? So Almeida says, or Almeida and Anninho, they sit down and they discuss, the game plan. What is the game plan? This is man and woman sitting down and discussing what is our plan, okay? And it says, we were sitting there, Anninho, with the others, and you turned to me. You said nothing. You just turned to me. And it was then I knew. That was the question, Almeida. How could we sustain our love at a time of cruelty? How could we keep loving at such a time? How could we look at each other with tenderness and keep it, even with everything? It's hard to keep tenderness when things all around you are hard. Okay? It goes on to say, a legacy of tenderness, which I put into my annotations, Black love. Black love is a legacy of tenderness. That's enduring no matter what. I may have pain. I may have tears. I may have loss. But I got love for you, but I also got love. If I don't have nothing else, I got love. And I think they knew the value of that. They knew the value of that at that time. But he also knew it was going to be hard hanging on to love at a time like this. Okay? And what I like about this is how Almeida said he didn't say anything to me. He just turned to me and I knew. Listen. That's her man. They know each other. They come from the same place. If they are not speaking the same language, they definitely speak that same language of love. It said, you said nothing. You turned to me and I just knew. So that again shows that heavy connection, this legacy of tenderness. They could connect on this level of tenderness. Okay? They says, as long as we hang on to a legacy of tenderness, then you've lost nothing. You remember how to look at each other, how to touch. Tenderness is a deeper thing than cruelty. Okay? And what I've been noticing a lot of lately, especially anytime I'm on social media, I'm going to go a step further. It almost finds its way of creeping into almost every conversation I have. This is how deep this gender wars is and the all-out assault on love is at this particular time. All-out assault on love. With it being one of the few things that can save us, the way people play with and manipulate and scam love nowadays. the way I see Anninhos doing Almeidas out here is real, real disheartening. Okay? It's real disheartening. And if tenderness is the legacy that is going to keep us alive, I am afraid we may be approaching the upper room. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I don't know at any other time in history, but I don't know, listen, I can only speak for my generation. I can't go back, but I can tell you right now where I'm at. And I have a son who represents the younger generation. Right now, even listening to the music and the commentary that comes out of that group, one thing that we definitely are not at this time is tender. We are definitely not respectful and loving to each other at this time. There is zero loyalty when it comes to people, and I'm going to just black men and women. I said it. It is a lack of loyalty. It is a lack of compassion. It's a lack of love. It's a lack of empathy. It's a lack of borderline humanity. Honestly, the way some of y'all have been all out showing ass out here, and I mean showing ass, when it comes to love and relationships. I wonder what Mother Gayl Jones would say. I really, really wonder, in consideration of this text. And I just got mad again. I told y'all I get triggered by it. But I wonder what Mother Jones would say about the state of Black love today. And honestly, she's, at the time that she wrote this in 1981, she was aware of what was happening. We were on a steady decline. We were on a steady decline. She's aware. I think that's why in writing this, being published in 1981, but it reflecting the 17th century, she was attempting to take us back, to remind us, okay? But even further, we've gotten even further away. I think of Tupac Shakur's line in Keep Your Head Up when he said, if we're not careful, we're going to have a race of babies that hate the ladies. Well, at that time that he said that, what was happening was, there was a lot of derogatory messaging in rap music, which now we've come to find out that the execs, the higher ups in the music industry would promote certain content in terms of, oh, the message here is in family building. We don't want y'all family building. Hold on. Because that's the revolution. We don't really want we don't want that. We trying to break families up. Hold on. Wait a minute. Y'all hold on. And everybody, well, I won't say everybody, but society, normally influenced by music, normally influenced by the art and the culture, they have played right along. They've played right along. Your favorite rapper told you a chick ain't nothing but a bitch and a trick, and hey, we go with it. We go with it. We gonna operate. We gonna act accordingly. Somebody tell you, dudes ain't nothing but hoes and tricks, and then there's groups of us who, okay, we gonna act accordingly. We gonna be as disrespectful as possible. We gonna be as disingenuous. We just out here sabotaging the culture. What's up, right? Yeah, that's the setup, or shall I say, that was the social issue that I feel like Gayl Jones is attempting to get ahead of here, okay? So the fact that this is our Anninho, the man who said this, he tells her, we have to keep tenderness. We have to keep it with everything. He told her that. He knew that, and she knew it too without him saying a word. It's the tenderness, okay? So, but despite the efforts, the old voice started getting drowned out by the new voice, right? Because this is a new world. The old world is left behind. So they are in, this new environment with new rules, with new ideals attached to it. And Almeida notices certain changes in her man. She sees how these transformations are affecting the connection, how it is affecting the union, okay? So also I want to talk to, really quickly with the cutting off of the breast. I made a note here that was done intentionally to show there was no difference between them. And I'm glad I made that note. I'm glad I made that note because what right now that's getting in the way of this tenderness seems to be an animus in terms of this idea of man and woman. So there's men who may have a gripe with women, women this and women that and women this and women that. And then it's men who have a gripe with, wait a minute, what did I say? Men who have a gripe with women, women this, women that, and women who have a gripe with men, men this and men that, okay? The downside to that approach is you are generalizing. That's first of all. I haven't met a woman or man who act exactly the same. So this idea that every time I approach the opposite sex, I'm going to approach it the exact same way. Or when it comes to women or men, I have a particular line of thought. That's so tragic and weak. Especially when it comes to black men and women. Especially when it comes to black men and women. Because what the slave owner did was they didn't give you gender at all. So this whole idea to associate oneself with man when at the time they didn't consider you man and they didn't consider her woman. And the fact that so many men and women try to claim ownership, I claim ownership of these ideals of patriarchy, that these ideals of men or what a man is, it was never even designed for you. Do you understand that? You wearing somebody else's shirt and walking around in cosplay. That was never your story. And I'm talking to men and women. That was never your story. You picked up somebody's story and then you went and you beat the person who was in the field right alongside you, because there wasn't no hierarchy with slaves. You wasn't going out and working and making a living and providing for her at that particular time. Y'all was all working together. So when did she become the bottom of your shoe? Like, when did that happen? Okay. And based on part 2 in this text, Gayl Jones text, it happened with the loss of name. When he failed to call her by her name and called her woman, the minute he started identifying her as something other than what she was, and not to say she's not a woman, but woman as the way that it is used, okay? They've made woman a cuss word, okay? So a lot of times when it's used, it gives you immediate connotations of weak, somebody who needs help or protecting, somebody who is, the weaker of the two, needs to follow, needs to submit, needs to be raised. whatever it is, okay? We've all really, really, really adopted it. Not only adopted it, but adopted it to the point that we abuse each other with it. Real cool. I mean, that's really, really cool. Yeah. The one person, you two knew each other prior to coming to this place. That's how far the black man and black woman go back. That's how far they go back. Look at how they act towards each other. You would think he don't know her at all. And you'll think she don't know him at all. I'll tell you one thing that, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm staying on track. 135. Hold on, Aletha. Wait a minute. Get through what you got to get through, and then you can go all rogue. Hold on. But we see in part 2 here that identification is being blurred. Okay, he knows her, but he's no longer seeing Almeida as he used to see her. He's seeing her through the lens of his experience. Okay, and his experience has been rough. His experience has been, his experience has been traumatic, right? So it is affecting how he's seeing her and how he is connecting with her. But she keeps trying to remind him of who she is, okay? So okay. Right. Okay. So again, of course, there's always this effort to remember. Okay. So when Almeida keeps going to Anninho, and they are reunited at this time, you guys. Okay. So part 2, they have finally found each other. Zabatra guided Almeida, through the hardship, through healing, into, finally coming together with her man. But now that they've come together, they are now navigating this foreign land as, I don't want to say as slaves. They're navigating this new space that they're at, okay? So they are establishing a new voice. They're establishing a new song. They understand that they have inherited ways of being. So there is reverence to ancestor. There is reverence to sources outside of oneself. It says here, she said, "You are the granddaughter of an African, and you have inherited a way of being." And her eyes stayed on mine. Who is this talking to her? Oh, I'm sorry. This is Almeida talking to Anninho. Okay. It says, "You inherit a way of being." And her eyes stayed on mine until all her words and memories and fears and the tenderness, there's that word again, and the tenderness ran through me like blood. That was the moment when I became my grandmother and she became me. So in this new place, a lot of times when you are separated from loved ones, that's when you hang on to them the most. You hang on to every memory. You really treasure the, memories, reminiscing on them. It becomes a source of strength. So we see that happening. Almeida knows she'll never see her grandmother again. She knows that. But what she's doing in this time is she is adopting her grandmother's ways. She's adopting everything that her grandmother deposited in her in order not to lose her. So in order not to lose my grandmother, I'm going to kind of, adopt and, her rituals, her traditions as a way of staying connected. Okay. So it says, so she's asking Anninho if he understands what she's saying, because she's telling him, this is how I connect, by connecting to my ancestors, by connecting to my grandmother. How are you connecting? And she said, she asked him, like, do you know what I mean by this? Our spirits were one with those who came before. And he said, yes, but it was more than that. And she said, yes, we are never alone. We keep everything. And he said, yes. Okay. So I really like part 2 because Anninho, he's sober. Like, they like this. Okay. He's processing what happened. And he's centering on what it all means. How do they move forward from here? What are they going to do? So they're making decisions together on how they are going to move forward. I like this. So it is several instances where Almeida and Anninho are meeting and talking. So, they are recaptured at this time. It's not describing this place as a plantation, so I'm not really sure the circles, what can I call it? The setting. I'm not really sure the setting for part 2, but there is opportunity for Almeida and Anninho to come into contact often. So she goes and work during the day. He goes to work during the day. And I'm going to say in the fields or whatever, work they do as, enslaved individuals, right? But when they come together, when they break or when they meet, when they catch glimpses of each other, they are normally interacting, okay? There is a connection between the two. So, hold on. He says, what was wrong with you the other day? I came to you and stood by you, but you didn't say anything. He said, I came and stood by you twice. And she was like, I don't remember. Okay, this is the first glimpse we're getting where they're starting to forget. Okay, so she says, I don't remember. And he says, but memory is a woman, which I like that because when I think about, the spiritual belief in Mami Wata, water is memory. That's its goal. It holds memory. So for him to say memory is a woman is, that's dope. I peeped that. It says, I don't remember. Memory is a woman. For a woman, memory is a man. Oh, he's everything to her. Do you understand me? If she's remembering love, it's him. She's remembering home, it's him. She remembering what she wants for the future, it's him. Okay? She's very clear on that. All right? It says, I kept watching how small your waist was, thinking what it would be like to have my arms around you. I wonder if when a man and woman feel something between themselves, other people feel it. They must. Then it depends on the people. Some men and women, when they're together, you can't tell there's anything between them. It is all their feelings. So I like that because I just was talking about how names have been swapped out for just titles of a man and a woman. It's like, I really feel like that with me, stepping on the other end, stepping out of my marriage, when I look at reasons why it went left, there's many, but when I look at reasons why it went left, I think of he didn't know me. He never really knew me. Okay? There was an identity issue. Okay? He did not remember me. Okay? When he saw me, all he saw was woman. And unfortunately, there are many men who, while they may like the aesthetic of a woman, they really don't care much about women. They don't care about women. Okay? And I say that to say all of them. They don't like women. There is a detachment that at some point took place. And yeah, it's severed. It's severed. I don't know if it was trauma. I don't know if maybe it was a bad experience. But I call it similar to what they called it in this book, self-mutilation. When you just on your own cut yourself off from love, or on your own just cut yourself off from the possibility of it, by discounting people as their sex, their chromosome, it's no hope for nothing else. Like, it really is nothing you can have with the X or Y chromosome. It's nothing you can have with that. That's not real. That's not really tangible. It's the person. That's why he says here, he says, I wonder if when a man and woman feel something between themselves, other people feel it. They must. He says, then it must depend on the people. Some men and women, when they're together, you can't tell there's anything between them. It depends on the people. You can't just get with a woman and make a relationship. Just like you can't just get with a man and make a relationship. Those things don't make a connection. It's the memory of who a person is. That person. You see how anytime Almeida refers to Anninho, she calls his name. I want the person. I'm not conjuring man. I don't want man. I want my man. That's kind of how she approach it. But it is independent or unique to the person. You should not, or there's no reason why we out here having multiple same experiences with different people. It's like you're not experiencing that person. You're experiencing a idea. You're experiencing what it's like to be with a woman, or you're experiencing what it's like to be with a man. But what about what it's like to be with, let me think of a name, Kenneth? What about Kenneth? What does Kenneth bring to the table? How do you identify Kenneth? What love, what specialty of love does Kenneth possess? See, those pursuits hit different than identification based on gender, which is kind of where we are now. But anyway, I'm getting caught up. All right, so with that part 2, Almeida and Anninho, they're talking about how to hang on to, efforts to recapture, home, the love that was lost. But during the process, there's a lot of walking. They are traveling. So I think I said earlier that they are enslaved. Not yet. We're going to get to it, but not yet. At this particular point, they have found each other. They are looking for safety. That's what they're looking for right now. It's them two together. They know that troops are looking for them, so they are on high alert. They're hiding in the rainforest of Brazil, doing their best to stay safe and stay together. Okay, that is the mission now. Okay, and you'll see in the text that they'll talk about how now is not the time for love. There's a time for war, time for peace, time to love. There's a time for everything. But what Anninho is realizing and understanding, now it's just not the time for love. And Almeida is saying, while it may not be the time for love, don't forget. Don't forget the love. Don't forget the tenderness, because war will end. And once war ends, we have to kind of pick up and do what we got to do, for nation building. Okay? So, war is a part of all things unfortunately, especially in terms of history, right? There is a lot lost in war. That's why it's so important to hang on to yourselves, to kind of hang on to what you can hang on to. They made a point in the book that in war, one of the things that is taken is the women. The women are normally taken in war from, the opposing side. And they said because the women hold memory, they're not leaving the women to tell the stories and teach the group, so that another group can kind of come up in place of the one that they just took down. No, because they know women are memory. They hold, the mysteries, so, that woman can have children, or she can become the elder in the community. She could be teaching them all what she knew, what she knew about the previous, group. So one of the first things that they would do in war is they would take the women and they would take the children. And they would normally take the women because the women were the holders of memory. They would attempt to marry them or violate them in some kind of way. But what they were attempting to do was to acclimate them into this new culture. Because if they can acclimate them into the new culture, then it can kind of build, this new group, right? But in order to annihilate the previous group in war, they would normally, fight, win, and spoil of victory would be taking the women and the children, building with the women, from that particular group. But also to ensure that another group didn't rise up, because they knew that the women held the memory. They would tell what they knew, teach what they knew, and what would happen is another group would rise up, okay? So they talked about that here in terms of a strategy, but they also talked about how this particular group in Palmares was affected by it on their own end, okay? So King Zumbi was the leader of the Quilombos, specifically Palmares. He was very beloved, a strategic, spiritual, courageous leader. They loved King Zumbi. They loved him. And because he was so loved, the Portuguese knew that in order to take down the Quilombos, in order to, really defeat Palmares, they had to kill their king, because the king was beloved. And they didn't want to just kill him. They wanted to, shucks. Okay, y'all, my battery is going low. I'm going to have to cut this short, I know. But they wanted to parade his head on a spike to kind of let that whole community know, oh, it's done. It's a done deal. They do it to kind of spread this spirit of hopelessness, right? It's a tactic. So King Zumbi was also a warrior, and as part of the group of slaves who revolted and escaped to the rainforest of Palmares of Brazil, in creating those communities, King Zumbi had to work with other groups. So in working with other groups, they would normally reach agreement. So I'm not going to say he would defeat other groups and take their women. It would normally be negotiations to live together, okay? But it would still be a coming together of the men and women from those groups. So in this text, with part 2, efforts to recapture, what Almeida notices is missing is something that started with King Zumbi, okay? So even though he was beloved and they looked up to him as their leader, King Zumbi also led a certain ideal that poisoned the group, okay? And I don't think he meant to do it at the time, but in reflection, we see what happened. Okay, so in the text, Almeida, which is the woman, the female here, Almeida tells the story of, she's reminiscing. Quite often in this book, she is astro traveling. She is taking herself back, whether it's in dream, whether it's in daydream. She's time jumping. She takes herself back to when King Zumbi was alive, when they were on the land in Palmares, and they remember him bringing forward a young woman. They call her Blanca Reina, okay? And she was the daughter of a leader who lived in the rainforest, right? An indigenous leader who lived in the rainforest. And by joining the groups together, the indigenous king married his daughter to Zumbi, okay? So it was designed to be, kind of peacekeeping. It looked like it was done in good faith, but its implications were long lasting, okay? With King Zumbi picking a woman who was different from the group that he was leading, he opened a proverbial Pandora's box, okay? So if any man was influenced by King Zumbi, or woman, I'm going to say man or woman, because this influences everybody. So if they were influenced by this move that King Zumbi made, if they felt that his wife was, let's say, more beautiful than the group, of women that he leads, it changed the standard, okay? And it takes me back to my point where I stated earlier that when you are in war, when you're navigating war, and let's say you are either captured or you are, negotiating rules of engagement with the opposition, there has to always kind of be this awareness of your position, okay? You are making decisions and operating out of your position. But when you mix your position with, in this case, the indigenous, someone who, they just didn't reflect the group, right? Or in the case of us moving or being brought here to America, by taking on or choosing or upholding a representative of the other group, the colonizers, and I'm going to say it, and I'm sorry. If you get mad and you don't like it, I'm sorry. It is our truth. It's our truth, okay? But with what King Zumbi did, that he may not be aware that he did at that time, is he unwittingly played into what would later become issues of value, issues of colorism, issues of blood, issues of blood. This is pure, issues of blood, okay? So with King Zumbi taking the Blanca Reina as his bride, almost every man in the Colombo fashioned himself after King Zumbi. So almost every man wanted him a Blanca Reina, okay? And Almeida notices that she no longer has her man's eye like she used to have her man's eye, okay? She's noticing. He's not looking anymore. She noticed he kind of was spending a little bit longer time with, certain women, amongst the group. What creeps into the love story is jealousy. Jealousy creeps in. And also issues with devaluing. Is this one better than this one? And in claiming that this one is better than this one, are you then confirming that that group is better than you? Because you use it to disqualify your women. Why would it not disqualify you? You know what I'm saying? Like that's what this thinking can, that's how that thinking can get tricky. Okay. So she talks about that, efforts to recapture. These are all the things that are getting in the way for her to recapture that time and that space and that place with her man. Quite a few things. Okay. Loss of identity, loss of home, loss of name, loss of how she's viewed, loss of her place in the, in the community, loss of her voice in, the tribe. She's been replaced by the, by Blanca Reina, by the group, the indigenous group. That group is now influencing her group. Okay, so it's a loss of voice. It's a loss of how she's seen. You know what I mean? I want to say the position that she carries, the position. Okay. So in addition to doing her best to stay free, stay safe, stay loved, she's also doing her best not to grow tired. Okay. So it talks about in part 2 how efforts to recapture led to weariness, lack of desire, lapse in memory. Okay. So it's almost like too much had happened, right? And, Almeida was weary. He talks about noticing the bags under her eyes, asking her, can she go on? Do you need a little bit more time? Do you need a longer rest? And she's doing her best to stay with him. But she's tired. Okay. So we start to see that in part 2. And she remembers Zabatra, the healer, the medicine woman from the first part, telling her, you are, what did I put here? You are you are bread with milk. You are bread with milk. And if you guys read this, you'll see the repetition that Gayl Jones uses again and again and again. She uses words again and again and again, but it, of course, is to emphasize it. So this bread with milk. And, I'm thinking, bread with milk. I'm like, okay, I do bread with milk when I do meatloaf, or if I do the milk and breadcrumbs with Salisbury steak, right? So I was like, oh, so it's the glue. It's what holds it together. She kept calling her bread and milk. You're the bread and milk. When she said, you're the bread and milk. I put here, she is trying to hold it all together. She is weary, but she perseveres because she knows she's the bread and milk. It says women represents, oh, I said that already. It says, well, I'll say it again. It says women represent spoils of war. They are always taken in wars of liberation. For those who normally take the women, I'm talking about King Zumbi here. In taking Blanca Reina, what happened was they forgot where they were and they forgot where they were and became where they are. So he started representing not who he was, but where he was. Okay. And you don't want to get lost in that, because who we are and where we are two different things. Okay. And sometimes when I close my eyes and I listen to a lot of the banter that goes on about relationships, especially between Black men and Black women, that's what I'm addressing specifically. in discussion of those relationships, if I close my eyes sometimes, I won't know who's talking. I won't know who's talking. Who is that talking? Is that us? Or is that somebody else? I don't know who talking. You don't know who talking. Because they don't really sound like the group. They sound like they now represent this space. Walking, talking, sounding just like the oppressor. Be very, very careful of that, because some of y'all, men and women, black men and women, if I were to close my eyes, I don't know who talking. I don't know who talking. It could very well be a bigot. I don't know who talking. I can't tell. It used to be a trope back in the day. It used to be a trope, a stereotypical trope, to call the black woman welfare queens and single moms. You know who called black women welfare king and single moms more than anybody in this day and age? Guess. I can close my eyes and I don't know who's talking. I don't know who talking. And in this particular text, I'm picking up Almeida is somewhere like, what the what? What's happening here? So we endured all we had to endure back with Buddy for him to come up here and parade around a blank Rana in front of our face. This is what's happening. And I like Gayl Jones. I like Gayl Jones because I told you she does not pull punches. So I feel like this is something directly she's addressing because she felt this way as well. Okay, because she goes into it. Okay, yeah. She goes in to say that the investment didn't really pan out with Blanca Rana. Or Raina, Blanca, Raina. Y'all listen. I try my best, okay? That Tulsa, it comes out sometimes. And Blanca, Raina. Blanca, okay? But she says in the text, Almeida says in the text, like, the magic didn't work with her because it's not her. It didn't work. Like what you thought it was going to be, it wasn't that. Because it wasn't going to work like that. Okay. It says the turning back. Okay. So we had them turning away from each other. Okay. Because for a minute, she started questioning if Anninho, you sure you still want to do this? Are you still in love with me? Do you still like me? Because he started acting distracted. He started acting like he had kind of other things going on. There's other girls prettier. There's things going on. And she kind of felt the distance, right? But in part 2, it also flips into a turning back. We see a turning back. And the turning back took place where Anninho, he turns back to Almeida and he recognizes her. Okay. They choose each other. They choose each other. It's not a him choosing her or a her choosing him. She asked the question in the text, and she asked the question specifically, why does one have to chase the other? Why do I have to chase you? And why is it required that you chase me? She's like, we the same size. And what she means by that is, they carry the same weight, in terms of contribution. Okay. So she's just like, and I keep saying this over and over again. And I said it from that first part second part, where the Portuguese troop, where the guys from the Portuguese troops, where they cut off her break. I'm recording. Give me 2 minutes. Where they cut off her. Turn it off. But turn it off. Sorry, you guys. But where her breasts were cut off previously, I took that to mean as there is no difference between the two. The oppressor saw no difference between you and her. They saw no difference. So the fact that a difference is being made in the way that it's being made now is problematic, okay? But she talks about that previously, and the two decide to turn to each other. The two decide to choose each other. Look, I started off with lipstick. I done straight up talked my lipstick off, okay? So it says in the text, the miracle of a choice, okay? So when they choose each other, to have a choice in a season of no choices is a miracle, okay? It says, look at me, the turning with all love, I am in it. So him turning to look at her, that turn, love was in it. He turned because he wanted to see her. He turned around because it gotta be her. Okay, so that was that part. All right, y'all, I'm letting it go. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap up with part 3 because we got through the overall displacement. We got through how they were recapturing the love, despite weariness, despite obstacles, despite, war. And part 3 is a look to the future, right? This is how will we carry on in this way? Like, what will the future look like for us, right? And part 3 opens up with Zumbi, and we see King Zumbi. He was the king, the ruler of Palmares, this particular Quilombo. And he was very beloved by this group. They saw him almost as a god, okay? So part 3 begins with them remembering Zumbi and his acceptance of others in his acceptance of other groups, okay? So he had an acceptance of other groups, but what Almeida and Anninho had noticed is that his acceptance sometimes was confused in place of his group. Do you see what I'm saying? He came with a group and then took another group and put that group in front of his group. Like, do you see what I'm saying? So she said, seeing things through Zumbi's eyes confused them, okay? So them trying to, adhere to their leader and how he ran things, it kind of confused the both of them. So what they are coming up with in part 3 is, how are we going to move forward for ourselves, okay? We have considered what our elders have to say. We have considered the ancestors. We've considered our grandparents. We have kind of taken our own voice in this matter. And now moving forward for the future, what are we going to do? How are we going to handle this, right? So that's how part 3 is opening up. It's all about resolution. They decide to take it back to the original true identity, where, again, instead of calling her woman, we see that he is now identifying her by her name, Almeida. So it takes it back to the original, her true identity, right? He remembered who she was. It says establishment of time and identity. By doing that, he reestablishes time and identity, okay? She is not lost because he reclaimed her. Okay, it says he restores her, recognizes her. She is the bridge. She's the bridge for the future. Okay, and it ends with that recognition. Okay, and that, what can I call it? That, the laying out of principles, they laid it out, and agreed together that this is how they will move forward, okay? So remember, he used her words. He used her name. Watch this. It says, one woman brought him a pomegranate, split it open. The seeds of the pomegranate are covered with blood. She raised one half to his mouth, the other to hers. Is this a colored woman? No, I tell you. She has made her skin dark and her eyes big with charcoal and licorice. And then it kind of has, Anninho interrupt her thought. This is Almeida thinking, and then this is him interrupting her. He says, "Kiss me, Almeida." This is him saying her name. And we really haven't seen him say her name since part 1. He had been calling her woman, and things like that. So he said, "Kiss me, Almeida. I kiss without words." And then it said, "Whose woman are you?" And she says, "I am Anninho's woman." And she was asked by another woman, "For how long?" She said, "From the beginning." And the other woman said, "Nonsense. How long?" And she said, "In the beginning, I was his." And the woman says, "Are you a colored woman?" Because she keeps trying to make, do you see how she keeps trying to take it and put it back? Hold on, wait a minute. I don't know how many times she said, "I am Anninho's woman. I am Anninho's woman." And they keep saying, "But aren't you a colored woman? Aren't you a colored woman?" She's asked that twice. And she says, "No, I am the granddaughter of an African." And then the woman says, "You are a colored woman then." Look how she keeps being reduced. She keeps being reduced. It was first of, "Whose woman are you?" Okay. Not who are you, but whose woman are you? So she's, okay, "I'm Anninho's woman." "For how long?" "From the beginning." Nonsense. She's like, "In the beginning, I was his." "Are you a colored woman?" "No, I am the granddaughter of an African." The lady said, "You are a colored woman then." They were dancing, they were raising their skirts and putting themselves close to him. They wanted his eyes to swallow them whole. This is the women that represent other. Okay? So they are questioning who she is to him when she's his whole moon. But anyway, I'm going to let that go. It says, "Where are the colored women?" And Almeida answers, "They are there, over there." And somebody says, "I want that one." And she says, "I am Anninho's woman." And then another one of the guys say, "Well, I want that bee with the charcoal eyes." "Yes, that one, yeah." Yeah, this is the language, okay? It says, "I have become this landscape." And that is what she was reduced to. Just a woman, just a word, just a, nothing more than breasts and what she got between her legs. Nothing more than that. You're not seen as anything more than that. Nobody expects you to offer anything more than that, So this is what I see now in 2024. But she's kind of fielding these questions. She's noticing that they're trying to put something on her that she is just resisting. It says, "Are you one of the master's bastard children?" She says, "No, I am the granddaughter of an African, and there are no bastards here." She split the pomegranate open. Oh, I just read that. Oh, no, it's another one. It says, "She split the pomegranate open and lifted half to his face. He did not eat of it. The seeds of the pomegranate are covered with flesh. She bit into it. She bit into the part she had kept for herself. Where are the bastard children then?" Look how they keep calling her out by these stereotypes. Y'all see it? Do you see it? They keep trying to make her be something that she is not. And they keep trying it. Now, how many times have they tried to call her a colored woman? Now they're trying to call her a bastard. Where's your bastard children? I told you, there are some days where if I close my eyes, I don't know if the person who is spouting this stuff, I don't know who they are. Because sometimes the person saying it look just like me. They look just like me. Look like a child I done carried. And they talk just like this. Close your eyes. You don't know who talking. Is it the colonizer or who? I don't know who this is. In my case, it was my husband. That's who it was. In my case. A whole op. In my case. Okay. It says, "Zumbi's eyes watch the two of us, for we have and chase those women away. And we stand before Zumi and he is glad we have come. Okay. Hold on. Okay. So with that little bit of confusion in the conversation between Almeida and Anninho, her man, she having to answer field questions from the sideline hoes, and in her responses, she's focused, laser focused. My man is Anninho. My man is Anninho. I don't have no bastard kids. That's my man right there. And she kind of, she says it again and again. So now Anninho enters the chat, okay, and he comes to her, and hold on, let me make sure I don't miss it. He says, "Talk to me, Almeida." And she said, "Yes, I am. I am talking." He says, "The sweet rain has come." No. She says, "The sweet rain has come and my breasts turn into buckets, and I cannot get enough of this rain." "Where are your breasts?" he asked, because remember, she lost them during that part one. A soldier cut them off. So she said, "The soldier cut them." He says, "You are beautiful." She says, "Those words belong to other women." He says, "No, you are beautiful, Almeida." She said, "I must speak with you, Anninho. There is something I must say." And here he says, "What is it, woman?" So there he go with woman again. But it says, "But we are sitting close together then. Anninho, we were so close, and there was only that way you were looking at me." And hold on. He says, "Well, do you want me to come with you?" He says, "Do you want me to come with you?" She says, "Yes." He says, I'm sorry, y'all, I'm messing this up. She says, "Do you want me to come with you?" He says, "Yes." She says, "There was only that way, Anninho, and that moment we had made." He says, "Do you want me to say something?" She said, "No." "You had made yourself a cigarette. You went away and came back and sat near me. I watched you and found some deep place in you where I could go any moment. Now I make roads for you, Anninho. I make roads." Okay? And that's how it ends. She's saying, I'm that bridge. However you need to get to me, I'm that bridge. Hold on, let me get it. She said, "You went away and came back and sat near me." He came back to her. "I watched you and found some deep place in you where I could go any moment." And she's determining that she's going to stay with him. Okay? She knows how times are. She knows that things can happen at any moment. But she's already establishing, if we were to ever get separated again, I'm already right now locating a place deep inside of you that I can go at any moment. She's already letting him know, "I'm not letting go of you again. I'm not letting go of you again." Okay? She says, "Now I make roads for you." Okay? That's so beautiful. And while this particular text triggered me heavily, you guys kind of caught a little bit of it as I was reading it, but it's a beautiful story. It is a love story. It is a love story in and out of time. And it specifically speaks to the culture. It specifically speaks to the history and heart and spirit of, the African-American male and African-American woman, and just the journey that they've traveled. And when I look at where we are right now, I have my days. Because I was heavily affected by this idea. It heavily impacted and affected my life. The idea that woman is less than, that woman is not valuable, that woman is under my shoe or under my foot, that you really contribute nothing more than your sexual body parts. I lived that, unfortunately. And with all of my attributes, with all of my, you know, everything that I brought, everything that I come with in being who I am, we could never get off the ground. The relationship could never really get off the ground because it was that hardness. There was not any tenderness or understanding for who the person was. Okay. So the major takeaway from this book is that it's a love story. It is a love story of displacement and separation and coming back together. Okay. It is told in that beautiful poetic language that only Gayl Jones can tell, only Gayl Jones can utilize. It speaks of hauntingly beautiful and hauntingly tragic circumstances in history. And in giving us this background, I believe that Gayl Jones wants us to be that bridge. She wants us to not forget. And the story, you can see, is for the man and the woman. I took a lot from Almeida out of this, but I also found a lot of hope and inspiration in Anninho. Anninho didn't let go of her either. He didn't let go of her either. He wrestled with what was taking place at times. She may have felt forgotten at times, but he did not let her go. He did not let her go. Okay. And when they came back together at the end and made a commitment to one another, Almeida committed that she will be the bridge. No matter what happens, you can get back. Find me. Okay. Find me. I have the memory. I have the tools, and together, we can get back. Okay. She talked about early on, like before wars, how the man and woman lived together, how they loved each other. So it's that vision, that they constantly think of when they think of home. It's the vision of the bond that they share, right? So really good. Really, 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 really good. Okay. I told you guys how I struggled with it, but once I got through it, once I made my peace with it, then it's a really, really good book. I have hope, in love. I have hope in marriage. But it will really take both groups. It will take both groups. This is not a one-man job. It's not at all. Okay. All right. So before we get out of here, because I've gone very long, but I'm not, sorry, not sorry. But I wanted to quickly set up videos or quickly lay out the books that I will be posting videos for in the coming weeks. Okay. This is my summer series. This is all about, learning more about those classics, those contemporary writers. And I also want to share with you guys the books that I've read since we've been apart. Okay. So not only have I read The Song for Anninho that we discussed, I also read Marlon James. And I bought this book a long time ago when I first moved to Chicago, and I found it in my, just kind of like in my luggage and things. So it's old. I haven't read it, I want to say probably since early 2000. So I read it again. And it was a really good book. This is by Marlon James. And in researching Marlon James, because I want to read some more of his books, so I learned he's from Jamaica. I learned he was influenced by a lot of the writers from that 20th century, the contemporary writers. And you can tell from, his style, his writing style, how he develops and tells a story, and how he, just the care he takes with his characters, because this book, the Book of Night Women, it's all women. All of his characters, main characters, are women. And his language, his storytelling, it's almost like he, I read this about him. He moves in and out of genres. So it could feel sci-fi. It can feel, you know, modern. It can feel a lot of different things happening at once. And that's why the experience was so rich and so engaging with Marlon James. So we are going to talk about the Book of Night Women, and I'm going to incorporate a couple more Marlon James books, okay? Another book that I pulled off my shelf is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And this book has been around a long time, also written in the 1980s, okay? So it still has, it's coming from a contemporary author. You know, they are reflecting what was going on at this particular time. So lots of spiritual awakening. I see it. I see it all over the place, okay? But The Alchemist is a classic. A classic. It's one of the best-selling books in the world, really. But my son, this was a book from his class. I think he was like in the 7th or 8th grade. And as I was reading it, it was filled with his annotations. So I just want you guys to know how special it was to read The Alchemist for the first time myself, but reading it on the back end of my son, and then kind of relating to and connecting with the notes he made in it, okay? It was so dope. But if you guys know anything about The Alchemist, I mean, really, I'm thinking about getting a tattoo that says Santiago. Like, you can't tell me I'm not Santiago. You can't tell me I'm not Santiago, you know, but he is a seeker. He is a star. He is a angel. Santiago is everything. Santiago is guided. Santiago listens to his guidance. And Santiago eventually wins. But this whole book is about his journey there, okay? So we are going to talk about The Alchemist because this thing blew my mind. This thing blew my mind, okay? So we're going to talk about that. Also, Ishmael Reed, okay? He's also a contemporary writer, really dope. And I'm just now diving into him, okay? I read a little bit of Ishmael Reed in college. I remember vaguely, but the time that I've read this book, Mumbo Jumbo, and have kind of dived a little bit deeper into him just as a writer, he's a conjurer. he's a high priest. Like he's not playing, okay? He is an artist. He's an essayist. He's a visionary. He's a visionary. And in this book, Mumbo Jumbo, it was way ahead of its time because as I'm reading Mumbo Jumbo, I instantly connected with that movie on Netflix called They Cloned Tyrone. This reminds me of They Cloned Tyrone, okay? This is a woke person observing what's going on around them, okay? Mumbo Jumbo, really good. We're going to dive into that this summer. Also, Eva's Man by Gayl Jones. We are getting more Gayl Jones. I also have a book of short stories from Gayl Jones that I may from time to time pop on to discuss with you. But you gotta get Gayl Jones in your life. You have to. You must. Okay. Also, a book that I don't have out is my Gloria Naylor, Mama Day. I read that over the holidays, and I want to talk about that as well. And Corregidora, Gayl Jones, Corregidora. So I'm going to put a list of the books that I have lined up to talk about this summer. If you have read them, if you have them on your shelf now, if you plan on reading them or revisiting them, please join me. Come back to this space. We are going to talk about a lot more books, especially from the contemporary authors, especially from this, 20th century Black women's Renaissance / the contemporary period, the classics. They call these the classics, y'all. Look how old I am. The classics, right? So we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to dive into it. I hope you join me on this journey. I look forward to speaking with you all again real soon. I plan to post videos every Thursday, but I may post more often than that. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave any comments, questions, engage in the comments. I promise to answer any questions. Correct me if you noticed any place where I've been wrong. But go ahead and join the discussion, okay? Here at the bottom Culture Club. And if you haven't checked out those first 2 or 3 videos, make sure you do so, okay? I hope you all enjoy your evening. I will be back in this space and place real soon, and I'll talk with you soon. Be blessed.